Welcome to the Level Up Artist Podcast. We are your hosts, Adriana Amay and
Jackie Sanders. We're two art professionals sharing for the advice and business lessons we have learned along our creative journeys.
We talk to artists, leaders, and art professionals to demystify the creative process and discover new ways to succeed as a career-minded artist.
If you find value in these conversations, please go ahead and subscribe. This will help other creatives like you find our podcast, and you'll be notified when we drop a new episode every Tuesday. On today's episode, we are so excited to be interviewing Mavis Gragg. Mavis is an art enthusiast based in Durham, North Carolina. A seasoned attorney and conservation professional, Mavis's work focuses on sustainable protection and growth of family generational wealth. Mavis' entrance into the art world began in Washington, D.C., where she served as a docent at the prestigious Popbox Gallery of Art. She is a founder of the Black Girl Basel and serves on the North Carolina Museum of Art Foundation Board of Directors and the National Friends Board. Mavis is an avid art collector and co-founder of Popbox Gallery, a zero-commission art gallery that exhibited works by triangle artists in 2022 at Boxyard Art TP. Thank you so much for being on today's episode, Mavis.
Thank you for having me. It's great to see you both.
Yes, it is. So glad to see you again. For our listeners and viewers. So we met, about a month or two ago here at Artspace, which is where we have our studios, as part of the Fresh series of exhibitions and activities, if we can call it that, and different lectures and whatnot. You were one of the panelists or leads on one of the panels. So I got to sit there up front with you, and you were a fantastic host and moderator. I was so glad. It took a lot of the nervousness out of me because I'm like, small groups of people, especially artists, not bad, big groups. So it was good. You kept us on track, myself and the other artists that were present. And I don't know, it was very comforting to have you there. I don't know. It felt nice. It felt nice. You come off as a very welcoming person, which I think is, obviously a good thing, but, fangirling.
Well, thank you for the compliments.
During that conversation, part of what we talked about is about art collecting, and we will touch a little bit based on that, of course. We want to share some of the topics of, that conversation in your area of expertise with, our fellow artists and art professionals that listen to us. But as a quick icebreaker, before we get into all the hard questions, okay, just kidding, they're not hard, but before we get into the meat of it, quick one for you. If you could meet one artist from the past, who would it be? Let's just start with that one and kind of go from there.
Wow, that gave me chills. One artist from the past. Darn. The first person that popped to my mind was Augusta Savage, but that has to do because I've been thinking about sculptures and sculptors, and particularly sculptors of color and women sculptors of color. So I think her, because I think, I would be interested to talk to her about what her experience was and during her time and why sculpture, et cetera. The 2022 Venice Biennale, the U.S. is represented by a Black female sculptor, Simone Lee. And so just thinking about, someone from the past and someone in the present, I think it would be really cool to talk to her and then share with her about what's happening now in 2022 at the Venice Biennale.
Yeah,
great question.
That's amazing. Imagine you with both of them in a conversation and be like, look at what has happened. And also, to hear both experiences.
Yeah. And the first one that you mentioned, when was she active? Or
early 1900s? Yeah, early 1900s.
Okay. That would be super cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And I love, especially, I feel like, as we touched on your intro and from talking to you, you obviously have education as a lawyer, but are an avid art collector. So I'm curious, how did you first get involved in the art world? Because clearly the art and art history is a huge part of your collecting as an art collector. So how did you first get started?
Well, I will say that when I first was intentional about collecting would have been around 2013, after I joined the Corcoran's docent program. But then once I started collecting work and people would ask this question about my collection, I'm like, wait, I just started. And then I started looking around my home and saw, oh, wait, I am collecting art. I may not know the artist, but I am collecting art. But in 2012, that's when I became a docent at the Corcoran, or actually started the docent training program, which is a year-long program. Unfortunately, the Corcoran has closed, but it was a year-long, very comprehensive training about the whole collection, about their approach to sharing the collection with the public, and also, of course, the history of Mr. Corcoran's collecting. And I thought, okay, yeah, he's this wealthy man who amassed a substantial collection that folks get to see now. I'm not wealthy like he was, but I do love the idea of connecting people with art, but also being a custodian of art. And so that's when in 2013 is when I made my first, what I would describe, big purchase, where I paid a good sum of money for some art, but also began building a relationship with the artists that I collected. And then it went from there. Like I started going to the art fairs in Miami in the winter, and there you get to meet different artists. You get to see art from all over the world across time periods. And so I was like, okay, people are custodians of this. The folks like me have a role to play in art. And so then I just started building my collection, primarily focusing on younger emerging artists.
That's amazing. And for listeners who may not know, the docent program at they're mainly at museums, and some galleries may have them, but it's mainly, correct me if I'm wrong, Mavis, was like an education program where then you would then be an official docent of the museum and lead tours, talk about different works in the collection. And it really is a great way, as you were saying, kind of like sparks that creativity as a collector yourself, as an artist yourself, or an art lover, to hear, oh, this is how, like for Corcoran, for example, it's one person's personal collection. These are the stories behind how they acquired this work, why they acquired it, maybe the relationship they had to the artist, or they saw the potential in a certain artist as what their future could be. And I definitely relate to that, of feeling inspired by those stories once you really learn about getting into the mind of an art collector, why it would make sense that it would then inspire you to be like, oh, well, I'm attracted to certain things, or let's see what happens if I collect my own artwork. So what kind of art do you find yourself gravitating towards for your personal art collection?
So again, not really conscious about this at first, but then like once I started looking at my collection and hosting art programming, really thinking about what's in my collection, most of my art is by women, and mostly by Black women. And most of my art is portraits. And I did not realize that until 2022, when Popbox Gallery, when we had our first show was around portraiture. And I thought about, oh, this is really cool. There's all these artists who have very different perspectives of what portraiture is. They depict, portraits very differently. And then I started looking at my work and I'm like, wait a minute, almost everything I have in here is a portrait.
Yeah.
I guess I like people.
I love that. And I think especially, even as you mentioned, like when you first start, there wasn't like a strategy in place. There wasn't like this big grand thing, but you mentioned twice now, it's like, you recognize, okay, this is a bigger purchase than you're used to making. And maybe it's more than like a $10 or $20 print. It's this piece of, it's big significance to you. So did you find or feel that at the time of like, you were consciously starting your own art collection, or is it just one big purchase that then turned into a second bigger purchase? And then all over time you say, oh, I have a little hefty collection here. Did it start off as like one big thing, or did you say, I am going to start my art collection right now?
The latter. I said, I'm going to start collecting art, and I'm going to build a collection of art. I don't know if I'm going to have a Gragg gallery of art that's open to the public. It depends on how I grow my wealth.
Yeah.
Just what I want to. But no, I actually made the conscious decision to build a collection of work, because for me, what I saw was multiple benefits. One, you get to have this amazing work in your home or wherever you put your art. You get to have this relationship with the art itself. But two, you get to support the artist. You help, you're collecting their work is a part of how they make a living, but it's also a relationship that you start bringing other kinds of support to the artist. Like most of the artists or the more, the bigger pieces, more expensive pieces that I have in my collection, I intentionally reached out to those artists first and started building a relationship with them before I actually acquired the piece, because I wanted, understanding their story and why they create what they do was important to me, interpreting the art and making sure that as a custodian, I would hold that. And so all that to say that I was very intentional about that, because I love that the experience of doing that. And it helped me feel like I'm part of something bigger, not just a consumer.
Yeah, I love that.
You mentioned, meeting the artist, which is awesome, do you generally try to buy directly from the artist, or do you also collect, online, open studios, going to galleries? Like, would you say it's like a mix of all of it, or is there one of those that you feel a little bit more that you lean towards more? Let's just go with that.
Yeah, it's a mix, and I don't think anything outweighs the other. I mean, I haven't paid more than $1,000 for something that I've just seen online and had an asynchronous conversation with someone about. So if it's 1,000 or more, then there's an investment of time on both parts. And I've done a mixture of buying directly from the artist and buying through galleries. I will say that early days, working with a gallery gave me more confidence about what I was doing, or working with an art consultant helped give me more confidence about what I was doing. Meaning that I needed to understand, for me, the market value of the art is important, because it is part of me building intergenerational wealth for my family. So it was important to understand like what the market value was for the property. That's the property for the art. But then also buying directly from artists later, like once I got more confidence in understanding and navigating. I felt like that was also good too, because, they get to keep 100% of the proceeds, and no shade to galleries at all, but that is a reality. Galleries do take a very significant cut, as you two know. Yep. And so I do appreciate buying directly from the artists and at the price that they would normally sell it, even if it was at a gallery, because I do think that that's, again, I appreciate as a business owner, you have to kill what you eat. And so it is important to.
But I think that's a great process to go through, of like almost like trusting the professionals that have like been in the industry for a while, them being collectors themselves, or even galleries. They represent people that they expect have a longevity in their career. They collect people that, in seeing what factors they also emphasize to you in terms of previous acquisitions, in terms of potential growth. They might be more educated and aware of the artist's history. So like, I think also from you educating yourself as a growing collector, you say, oh, okay, well, this is clearly an important factor. Okay, this is also another important factor. So you then train yourself of knowing what to look out for, what questions to ask the artist to, like, especially if you're talking to either emerging artists or emerging to established, they themselves might not even know what things matter. They just make the work and they're exhibiting it and showing. They don't might not know how to market themselves as an artist worth collecting.
It's really challenging, because I will say, now that I've been hosting programs, sorry, I have a computer that's making noises. I'll try to move that. But I will say that, now that I've been hosting art programming where, artists talk about folks collecting their work, we have like this dialogue, kind of like what we did, Adriana, with Art Space. I do recognize that it should be a democracy, and the artist should be able to, sell the work the way that they want, set the parameters, et cetera. But, it can be challenging from a financial perspective. If I may give an example, there was an artist that I wanted to collect recently because I loved the piece. I just did not know the artist. They are not represented by a gallery. They don't work with the gallery. And the price point for the art, in my view, was on a level where I'm like, oh, it is a risk for me, because, an investment that could be risky in that it may not retain any value. And so what's the why for me behind doing that? So this piece was $9,000. So to me, that's a big investment, based on my financial position. And if something happened to me, if I pass, or when I pass away, what happened, that piece of art, like if no one in my family likes that piece of art, or wants it rather, then, would it resell at $9,000? I don't know. There's no market. And so unless the artist was able to demonstrate to me that there was a market, which I don't know how they would, it wouldn't feel safe, so to speak. But even as I'm saying this feels really hard to say, because it's like, it can be subjective, and that's okay. But I think striking a balance is what I try to do. Like in this case, I knew for me, if I paid $9,000 for that piece, it would need to hold value, because it would need to be part of my building intergenerational wealth. Again, if I was paying $1,000 less, it would be fine. Like I would be okay with that. But that even that level could be different for someone else, because the difference between having money to pay for your car payment and groceries versus buying a $500 piece of art could be a big difference. So,
yeah. Well, I have a follow-up question with that. So, okay, so there's a couple things I want to kind of dive into or go a little deeper on. So earlier in the conversation, we were talking how a lot of it seemed to be, or at least when you were kind of looking back at your collection, female artists, Black artists, lots of portraits. But now we're going a little bit deeper into the whole investment side of things. So I want to kind of dig into that a little bit. Would you say, is there a distinction between, say, the art that you're collecting for investment may not necessarily be the same style as what you started with? Like, say this $9,000 piece, is this still, sorry to dig in, obviously you can, go into as much detail as you like or not, but like $9,000 piece, are you saying, or would it be accurate to say it is by a Black female artist of a portrait, so it's still within your taste and your aesthetic, but there's still the concern of like, will this be a worthy addition to my legacy, so to speak, right? Like, is this going to accrue value over time? Or not necessarily, could they be separated? And it could be something completely different where you just buy it. It doesn't matter who did it. It's just more like, I'm buying this as an investment, just like I would buy a stock in the market. Like,
it's kind of a gamble.
Correlated?
Yeah. So the piece that I did not purchase, the $9,000 piece that I was interested in but did not purchase because of the amount. Like, if that piece had been $1,000, actually, if that particular piece had been like $3,000 or less, I would have given it much more consideration, because I would feel okay if it didn't retain value. That if none of my heirs wanted it and it couldn't be sold because there's no market for it, I wouldn't be here, but I wouldn't have any grief about that.
You wouldn't like a regret.
Exactly. It would be for my personal enjoyment.
Right.
But at that price point, at the $9,000 price point, I just need to feel comfortable. So the other thing is, an insurer, would an insurer even replace that? Allegedly they're supposed to rely on the bill of sale, but I could see that an insurer would even argue whether that piece is worth that amount based on, the market for that artist's work. So I can give you two examples where I passed on a piece of art because I didn't feel like I knew enough, and I felt like it was too big of a gamble based on the price point. And those were also portraits by a Black female artist. One was at a show at a community art center in Dallas. So not a museum or art institution, so to speak. I loved the piece. I think the piece was actually a lower price point, but I was on sabbatical, meaning I wasn't working. I knew I was going to be taking off with the next year. So I was like, okay, I could spend $2,500 on this piece, or I can have a lavish time in Europe for my sabbatical. And it felt too risky. I was just like, well, it's probably not prudent, or, I should just buy more wine and baguettes in France. I don't know. So I passed on that, and I wish I had not, because that artist not only has the value of her work increased, and that piece that I would have bought, the value would have increased, but I just think she's doing really amazing things, and it would be an honor to have her in my collection.
Right.
But now it's kind of outside of my means.
Yeah.
And so that was
that is about timing too. Like you were saying,
absolutely.
It might not even be like you had the idea about it, we weren't sure, but you're like, there are also real world factors of the day-to-day logistics of car payment or rent, or, okay, I want to go on this vacation. This feels like more of a gamble than experiencing Europe to its fullest, or more luxury, which has a direct effect in return on investment.
Yeah. And here's the thing, and I think this was probably immature in terms of collecting at the time. If she had been represented by a gallery, and if I would have had the opportunity to talk to the gallery and her, then I probably would have bought it. And so then distinguish that from another piece an artist whose work I saw in an exhibition in a well-known museum. And I knew the curator who curated the show. And the price point for that was like $8,500, and it was a huge piece, like very tall. And I was like, okay, I can either get. You said what?
Where am I going to put it?
Where am I going to put it? And at that time, I also knew so this was maybe 2 or 3 months away from my sabbatical. I was like, well, I could buy this. I could invest in this big piece of art. I do think it's going to hold its value. It likely will increase in value. I don't know how much. I know this person was represented by a gallery. She's also in this art institution. I'm like, it's probably a good deal. But it's also huge. And again, pointing to my immaturity at the time as a collector, I passed on that one. Well, that was Amy Sherald, who at the time, I didn't know this at the time, but at the time she was already been engaged to paint the Obama or Michelle Obama. Yeah. And so if I had kept that piece, if I had bought that piece, then not only would it have been a beautiful piece to have in my collection and take up over most of my walls, but it would have been a good financial investment too.
Yeah. And amazing, like tie to history too. But I'm sure for as many stories, just like with any entrepreneur opportunities, like the number of opportunities where that happens, where people pass on those, there also have been some awesome investments that you've made or artists that you've supported that are continuing to grow.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And and I will say those lessons have helped me hone more in on, things that I am most comfortable with. Like for me, working with emerging artists or younger artists, feels like, even if there is a financial stake from an investment perspective, there is a social impact stake from an investment perspective. And that, if I spend this money collecting this person's art, this really will help them push their career forward. So that's what I've stuck with. And not thankfully, but what has been nice to see is following these artists' journeys. So people who are students, artists who are students, and now I've been able to be a part of their journey. We stay in contact in some form or fashion. One of them has gone on she's a photographer. I think I spoke about her at the panel, Adriana Kennedy Carter, and she's doing amazing things. And I got to be part of the early stages of her journey. And now I get to say, oh yeah, she took a picture of Beyonce for British Vogue and Erykah Badu. Yeah. Like she's doing it. She's out there. Yeah. She's living her dreams. And it's nice to say that I got to be a part of that from the early days.
Yeah. And I think that's such the rewarding part of like making those relationships with emerging artists, but then also, like you're saying, like supporting them, financially investing in their work. Because worst case scenario, quote unquote, in terms of investment, like you're still supporting an artist that you connect with from a larger, socially supporting someone who you believe in them, you believe in their work. So even if for whatever reason, the artwork doesn't grow in value, it's also still a piece that you connect with a message that you connect with. And those relationships, especially as you get them as like acquired pieces as an emerging artist, before they become the point where she's off taking pictures of Beyonce doing this, doing that. Like if you're trying to send her an email, she might not be as approachable or have the time to be like responding to all these acquisition questions. But that does bring me to our next question of what can artists do to present themselves in a standout way to collectors, curators, writers for magazines or gallery owners? I know you mentioned you really factor in gallery representation, exhibitions they've had in the past, but have you found of any other factors that you think about when considering artists that you're collecting?
Yeah. And to clarify, now I don't care as much, or I don't give it as much weight, gallery representation. Yeah. Now that I've honed in more on what my interests are. But I think a big thing that artists can do is have confidence in themselves. And that was one of the things that struck me about you, Adriana, even just in preparation for the panel, reading about you and your journey to that, but then also how you developed the business side of your art, so to speak, said to me that you had confidence in yourself and believed in your art and believed that, your art is worth something. I think that's one of the first things that artists can do, because I've seen time and time again where so many artists just don't have confidence, and I get it. Lawyers also don't have a lot of confidence. But, and believing in yourself and believing in the worth of your art says a lot. And I think that shines through in how you engage with people who appreciate your art and are interested in collecting your art. So I think that's the first thing you can do. But I think also setting some norms for having a business model, setting some norms for your work so that people understand, for example, if you're a painter and you do, paintings of a certain size, but then decide that you're also going to take those same images and make them into shower curtains, like make sure that people know that. So just help people understand kind of what your model is for your work so that they can know and expect where it should be. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking out loud too. But I remember this artist whose work I bought, and I didn't pay a ton of money for it. It was under that threshold. And then I was shocked to see that it was on one of those sites where you could like get it in a shower curtain and a phone cover. And, going back, I kind of vacillate between this whole art democracy thing and then also just wanting things to have some value. It's not that I liked the work less or anything. Like, I just wish I would have known kind of what her approach was.
Okay.
If that makes
Actually,
sense.
that brings me to another question. Okay.
Yeah.
Because this is something a lot of artists grapple with. Where is the line between being fine art with a capital A, so to speak, versus I got to pay my bills. So sometimes art products are necessary in order, to like have enough to make it. So if an artist say we have the $9,000 artist example, just, for giggles, but you have the $9,000 artist, would you be less likely to collect them if that art was also on a mug or shower curtain, like you said? Or would you be like, I respect that you're trying to like pay your bills too, you're still in exhibitions and whatnot? Or would that be like, whoa, too far? I don't know. I have to ask.
So I'll give you a lawyer answer.
Yeah.
So if I'll give you a lawyer answer, and again, I'm talking as I'm thinking.
Yes.
I would distinguish it from, like, I guess it depends on the journey of the art or the provenance of the art. So if you create a piece and it's being exhibited in institutions, et cetera, and then you also decide to make art products, is that what you called it? Like, mugs, hell, even a shower curtain, it would at least feel like there was something that it wasn't just an aesthetic, and it was just that it was also something that was being informative, that you can engage in conversation. I mean, I know I'm dissing shower curtains as art, but I don't know, like, so I think that now I'm forgetting your question, but I do think it would depend on what the journey of that art is. This person created an original piece that I bought, but then made different versions of it. And then like it was mass produced. And I was like, well, okay, but she also wasn't exhibiting it anywhere either. So it just felt like, okay, so I bought a more expensive piece. Now I'm questioning myself.
No, that's
yeah.
And
I
wanted to ask about it, because it's different if I feel like if it's created purposely as a product is one thing, and chances are the price ticket on it is not going to be as high. But it would be more like, let's say the piece already got exhibited, it's already been around, and then it's different. We're not even going to talk about fine art prints, because that's acceptable, right? Even by capital A art, but more like, if the piece hasn't gone through that exhibition journey yet, right? Hasn't gotten the renown for the artist, and it's like, does it quote unquote cheapen it to have it also as a product simultaneously before buying? So just to kind of put it out there, like, my opinion on my end is like, I probably won't do it as a product until after it's sold. And then I think doing it at that point, as opposed to have the original compete against the product of the same thing.
And I think that's an interesting conversation though, because it sounds like from potentially, and again, we're all kind of brainstorming as we go, of like, as the collector, like, would that be something that as an artist you feel like needs to be explicitly told, be like, with the purchase of this piece, like, I will be creating art products from it. I don't know if that is something that needs to be explicitly told or pointed out, or if that affects the value of the original work itself. I don't know.
I have the terms and conditions on my website, technically, where it says, and obviously you're a lawyer, you can confirm this, of course, because we can't give it. But, my understanding, at least in the US, as an artist, your original that you create, you retain copyrights to it, and reproduction rights are part of that. Right. So like, for example, on my website, I do have a disclaimer on it that if, say, you as a collector, and I don't know, maybe this is the thing where, to kind of like synthesize it, is that if you as a collector said, okay, you have the rights, but I'd rather you not have reproduced it, then I'll say, then you have to purchase those rights from me. Right. And then it won't be a print, it won't be a sticker, it won't be a mug, shower curtain, nothing. But technically, as the creator of the artwork, I have the copyright of the artwork. Thus, technically I can. Right.
Absolutely.
It just that question of like, I guess I guess from a legal standpoint, we're clear, at least in the US, we can. It's more on the side of, does it really hurt? I don't want to call it a reputation, honestly, but the perception as an artist, if I'm also doing that too, and you coming in as a collector and you type in my name and Society6, Redbubble, Fine Art America, one of those comes up, and you see, I mean, let's just go with it because it's funny. You see that painting also as a shower curtain. It's like, I'm not paying $9,000 when I can have a shower curtain version of it. I don't know, like from your perception, does that hurt the chances of an artist that wants to go that way? Ooh, I know.
It's so hard. Yeah. It's interesting because one of the students that I supported when she was in I think she was in grad school, and I can't remember actually, but an art student that, and I supported, I bought some prints of her work. So I knew when I was buying that she produced multiple, and I think it was even open edition. But I had the chance to talk to her and ask, just talk to her about what her plans were. And I expressed to her, okay, I've bought these prints, but I'm also interested in buying originals. Do you plan to make originals available? And she said, I don't. And she was actually like her mission with art was accessibility and making art for people, for everyone to have. And so her model was going to be mass production of her art. And I knew that at the outset. And she wasn't actually making originals available because her belief was that she gets to keep her originals, but she gets to let as many people who want to have it in her collection have it. And I was like, you know what, that sits well with me because I know what your approach is. And I actually appreciate that. So I guess what I'm getting at then, again, thinking out loud, is if I, as a consumer, understand better what your approach is and the why behind it, I think that can make a difference in my decision making, but also even just in my, appreciation of you as an artist. I do distinguish what you do, Adriana, and I'm sorry, Jackie, I'm not as familiar with your work, but I do appreciate what you do because you do offer a lot of information to educate us as consumers, down to the type of paper and where you source it from. And like you said, the terms and conditions. Like, I know that you've been very intentional in creating the business side of your artwork. And so that helps me understand what I'm investing in. Distinguish that from someone who is like, oh, okay, I'm making art. No one's buying my art, or I'm not selling enough art. Let me just put it up on Society6 or Redbubble. Right. I'll give you an example. Actually, the other day, this artist that I collected, I have a print that she did that she is a painting that she then embellished on, and it's signed, and I love it. And she died a couple of years ago. And so occasionally I try to check in to see how her estate is handling her art, because I know that I assume that she had a lot of pieces still left when she passed away. And it's so sad. That, it looks like it looks like multiple people are duplicating her art as prints and then selling it on various platforms. And there's litigation for her estate. But it also looks like her estate is having challenges with managing the sale of her original pieces and even the prints that she did that she embellished on. Yeah. It's like, dang, she had a model where she would offer originals, but she would also offer prints that she embellished on. And those prints have value, but now that she's gone, it's probably for naught. So yeah. It's like her business model didn't sustain. And now I'm getting into the legal side. I think artists should have succession plans.
That's very true. I feel like any business owner. Yeah. I recently took a business class, and that was like the first assignment was like, well, how are you going to close your business? And everyone's like, what? Like, I'm still in the beginning. Like, I'm hustling, I'm making it work. And they're like, how you want to end your business affects how you want to build it. So like, are you going to create an estate? Are you going to donate your artwork to a specific institution? If so, which one? Like, what does that process look like? Are you going to hand it off to someone else and they run it? And so I think that's really good in terms of like factors of, as an artist, and seeing the value of artists who build their business and art practice intentionally. I think that's what it comes down to. You want to have the confidence knowing that you as a collector have trust in them, because they're thinking through these factors. They're not just doing things offhand for a quick buck or a short-term gratification. You want to trust that they are educating themselves, educating you as their collector base, and making conscious decisions in their growth that it can be trusted long-term. Yeah. Very intentional with every decision, whatever that decision may be. If it is, these are art products and these are originals, great. But knowing what you're getting into and not being surprised by anything.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I've seen numerous examples of, so my law practice centers around death, or when I have my law practice, it's centered around death and dirt and like helping people plan. And I've done workshops for artists on succession planning. And I do distinguish estate planning from succession planning. Succession planning is for businesses and really setting up both the ownership, but also the management and the use of your art. I think that's really important. And I suspect Adriana's already set up for that because she already has a legal entity that will be, will have successors. Mm-hmm. But there are a couple of recent examples that I saw where the artist didn't have that. And now there's this work, and it's like, what's going to happen to that, and how is it going to be stewarded? But there's something else you said, Jackie, that I just wanted to acknowledge that I do think that all of that is hard. So I have worked with artists as estate planning clients and have talked about, putting your art, creating an art business, creating an entity for the management and everything. And I realized getting outside of the art mind mm-hmm. is not something that many artists want to do. And even talking about, people collecting your work. There are artists, more and more artists I'm meeting don't want people to collect their work. And I'm like, okay, so you want to make a living as an artist, but you don't want anyone to collect your work. And I think the naive determination around that is like, that's dumb. But then I'm like, well, Mavis, if you're truly an art enthusiast, if you truly are committed to the art making community, then why does it only have to be that you give financial support to an art institution? What's wrong with simply being a patron to an artist? Instead of buying a $500 piece, why not just give $500 to an artist to do whatever they want with it? Why does it have to be an exchange? So I am working on myself in that respect.
Foundation. Grants available.
Yeah, but no, that's that's exactly what I'm thinking. And rather than giving it to like a museum to collect art or whatever, why not just give artists some cash?
Just to do their work, though. Maybe have a grant process,
right? Have some accountability measures.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be an artist consumer.
Yeah, there's a lot of artists. What they're going to do is they're going to take that money and go to the art store and just blow it on art supplies. But instead, it could be like, this is a grant for you to work on the planning of your business. So you got to show me that's what it's for. That you need a website. That you need this. You need that. Mm-hmm. I think that's going to turn into a different, episode maybe in the future. I'd be interested to learn more about the planning side. For the most part, now it's more like having inventory that my husband has access to. So if something happens to me, he knows where my paintings are at, if they're on exhibition, what's in the studio, how much it is, when it was completed, sizes, like the whole shebang. That's the left brain side. I mean, I came from a corporate environment. On top of that, it was investments, not art though. We were doing stock market, mutual funds, but still that translates over. But different conversation for a different day. Just to bring it back around real quick.
Sure.
I am like kind of gathering again, like synthesizing a little bit from what you've been sharing, that as long as the artist is kind of clearly, kind of presenting themselves, if you will. So say it is that person that does a lot of products, versus pursuing, say, capital A art world, quotation marks always when we say that, and it's more museum or somewhere in the middle, which of course is also a viable, way to go. I'm gathering, as long as it's like presented in a nice, clear manner, as long as the story behind the art or the intention, if you will, is kind of clear, I think it sounds like that makes it easier for you as a collector to kind of decide what level of involvement do you have with that artist. Do you want to get to know them on a more personal level versus, no, I like the aesthetic, I'm just going to buy it anyways, even if the artist's personality is, which happens sometimes, of course. We all have flavors. But I do have a question for you, like, especially since you've talked about wanting to interact with artists, learn more about them. Obviously, this is something that for a lot of artists, myself included, I didn't know it was a viable option to have art as a career. And it took a long time, over 12 years, for me to make, to know, oh, this is a thing. Hold on, you can do this. But as you speak to different artists, with varying degrees of success, obviously some of the ones you've talked about have gone on to now have very successful careers. Do you have any advice for artists that, something that you keep seeing pop up over and over again, artists that are trying to make a living from their art? I know you talked about their story, and, you talked about them, presenting themselves professionally. or having a little bit of that mind, like business savvy, if you will, or at least learning some of that. But is there anything else advice wise that you're like, there's the sauce, I keep seeing pop it over and over again for those artists that are like, I want to make a living, and in your eyes, they seem successful. Is there anything there that you would like to add?
Yeah. Initiative and persistence. Initiative and persistence.
How about their personal story?
Initiative and persistence about sharing and connecting. And again, I get it that many artists they're human. We're all human, but it can be very overwhelming. It can be very hard, but I do think you have to put yourself out there. You have to connect with people. You have to network. And I know that for some people feels very icky, but I think you have to get out there. It's not just going to happen magically. I mean, it could, but the likelihood of success without taking any initiative is very small. And I think you also have to be persistent. Now, this is me not having been an artist and like having to, or trying to make a living for myself as an artist, but I can say as an entrepreneur, I have to be persistent. Like you have to kill what you eat. And so you're going to have to do rainmaking, so to speak. And what are those activities that make it rain? It's getting into shows. It's, letting people see your work. Some artists don't want to have a website. Well, guess what? Like, where are people going to see your work? Or you don't want an Instagram. I get it. I don't like to manage Instagram or social media for any kind of business purpose, but it is how you get exposure. So taking initiative and being persistent, I think are very important if you want to make a living, if you want to be able to actually eat.
Yep. As much as we wish we could just sit in our studio and paint all day, that's not exactly the key to, like, one day I'll just get discovered if my artwork is good enough, quote unquote. And you're like, well,
yeah. And even that, I think,
comes at the right time, but there's certain things you can do exposure wise, telling your story, networking, that put the factors more in your favor of having that happen.
Yeah. And, maybe there are people out there who can be your patron and just pay for you to sit in your studio and paint and enjoy yourself. But I think I would suggest it would still see that. Right. I think, I believe that it still requires getting out there and taking initiative to meet people and let them see your work so they can say, yeah, I want to pay you just to paint art or make coins or.
And I think that's what you've even mentioned on the panel that Adriana was on and that I attended of talking about, that is where galleries do still hold a lot of very beneficial power with artists, to where you can kind of go either way. You can represent yourself as an artist, put your story out there, network, take that initiative, have an Instagram, have a website, self-represent yourself. Or if you truly feel like, I don't want to do that, or I want to be told what you need to do and be given a deadline, then being represented by a gallery can be very beneficial. Yes, they take a cut of the sale, but they come with a collector base that they are already networking with. They have partners. They say, okay, we need the story behind this. We need XYZ. And that is where, if you truly are an artist, to our listeners out there that doesn't necessarily want to do all those things on their own, they may still require that you have an Instagram that you post on once a week, or they might require, okay, here's a bare minimum website that you need to have to be part of our gallery. But that may be a less intimidating entry point than fully marketing yourself and your artwork and the stories behind your work as an entrepreneur. Yeah.
So I had a question for y'all and I just forgot it. No, I forgot it actually. Anyway, maybe it'll come back to me.
Real quick, as we wrap up, let us know if you remember that question. But one thing that we like to ask all of our guests is, how would you define success as an art collector?
Besides making all the $1 million when you sell the art later, that's one measure, I'm sure. Or having a museum with your name on it.
Oh, I know.
That would be really, but those are like longer term, more on the shorter term.
Yeah, I think success as an art collector would be knowing what my personal philosophy around collecting is, and feeding that. Not trying to be competitive or I do think collectors can be competitive. I haven't experienced that with anyone directly, but just knowing what my philosophy is and working towards that. And I think also for me, success as a collector would be having a plan for succession of my collection, not just saying, because one of my hobbies is looking at estate sales and going to them when there's a right one. And I cringe when I see estate sales with art, because I'm like, oh no, like this artist, maybe the artist should be involved in this, not such and such estate sales. I don't know. But having a succession plan for your collection, and then also sharing your collection. So something that I've been doing recently is a personal loan program where, with close friends that I trust and my sister, but giving or making long-term loans of my art to folks so that they can have it in their home and see, experience what I experience in my home as a way of thinking about how they could do the same. So that's something I started over the last year. I think I have like maybe 8 pieces with a variety of friends and my sister.
Oh,
I think that's
like inspiring and sharing the joys of having original art in your home, and maybe inspire them to even think about starting a collection of their own in whatever scale or size it may be.
Yeah. And I think it's a model of it.
You've probably gotten to the point now where like your collection has grown off of your walls, and as much as you want to like a salon style of artwork in every room, and then there's still limited wall space.
Yeah, absolutely. And, if I'm advocating for art institutions to be more accessible and inclusive, why not have the same standards for myself? I mean, I shouldn't just be collecting art for my own consumption. I can share the love, so to speak.
Yeah. Now, from your end, as putting your art collector hat on, which you have been, of course, when you're looking at an artist, what makes you go, that's a successful one? And I don't mean like just social media followers, because that's too hard and kind of a vanity metric, but is there something where you're like, they're killing it, this is it? Is it more like clout, like reputation that they're building? Or is there like volume of work that they do, or representation? Like, what for you makes you go, that's a successful artist? Like, is there anything that just kind of comes to mind?
I mean, I will say, and you've probably already heard this, Adriana, in preparation for the panel we did a couple of months ago, I looked at each of the artists. And again, I was like really struck by what I learned about you and your art business, so to speak. And that to me is affirming. So when I can't find an artist out on the internet, I know it's the tech age and maybe it's silly, but it does make it more difficult for me to learn about the artist so I don't know, like, success, that's hard. Well, are they happy? Are they doing what they want?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there are artists that I've connected with in the past, and then now they've kind of fallen off the radar. And I do wonder, like, are you still doing art? Is it still serving you? But yeah, I've never thought about that question. That's an interesting question.
Would you agree, or like maybe this is part of it, but would you define an artist successful if it seems like their message they're trying to get across, or like their story is showing up in their artwork? Like, would you consider that like a measure of success, where it's like you look at the artwork and you're like, yep, resonates, and then you're like, you read their story and you're like, actually that makes sense? Like, there's a
I could see that. Yeah, I could see that. Yeah. And then I guess, to the extent that I've known an artist over some time and I can see them achieving the goals that they've expressed to me, I think that could also be success. One artist comes to mind where, they want people to collect their art. They also want to make a living off of art. But at that time or early stages when I met them, they were not. They actually, in my view, were selling their art for too low of a price point, based on the quality of their work, where it's the provenance of their work, et cetera. And it's nice to see now that it does appear that they are selling their work for more, and actually selling a lot of their work. And I even sensed a new sense of confidence in this person when I saw them recently. And I wondered if part of that was because it did feel like they were where they wanted to be, that, that goal that they had shared with me before, had they reached that place. I mean, it seemed like they may have. So that looked like success. I never thought about it in that way, but I think thinking back, I think it does.
Yeah, like evolving trajectory and confidence, and then also increased value in their work. To me, sound like those are 3 part of the magical formula for you.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
Awesome. And I think, especially as a collector, Obviously, you've shared so many different things that you've learned with your relationship with artists, but also from pieces in your collection. So I was wondering, like, what is one piece of advice that you wish you had heard before you got started on your art collecting journey?
Okay, well, I have a double standard on this. So the more expensive pieces that I've bought with money that, not money that I've earned, so I haven't created my own, like, kind of, or at least early days, I didn't have like a separate art fund or like put away money for purchasing art. I did do payment plans to make some purchases more accessible, but some of the larger pieces, I used insurance proceeds. And so that felt like a windfall in a sense. And it's like, well, if you appreciate the work and you feel like it's worth that much, why not just also save money to buy art? So I think that's some advice that I wish I would have had before I started collecting art, that you should put aside money for art, just like you put aside money for the vacation or for, I don't know. I'm not really into shopping like that, but I think you should have savings for your art to collect. And it shouldn't just be that it's money that you got not by chance, but, through some sort of windfall or, something happening and then just making cash available, if that makes sense.
Right. Or even like a gift of sorts. Because then, of course, it is still money that you're spending. It's still an investment, but it might not feel as much of a weight. You're like, oh, well, it was quote unquote free money to start, so I'm just getting artwork with it.
Right.
But yeah. And that's one thing that I know we've talked about on a previous episode about like starting your collection. I've been slowly starting mine for about the past 10 years as well. By no means has gotten to the size of your collection yet, but even starting with being in art school and buying pieces off of my classmates. Now they're graphic designers at these large firms in New York. And it's like, well, I have this print that they made like their third year of college, or going to other artist shows where it's, okay, I'm going to set aside $40 a month, which might not feel like a lot, but okay, save up 2 months and you can get a nice art print. Save up like once a quarter, every 3 months buying, and slowly over time, that $40 a month, budgeting $50 a month, it slowly can become a monthly budget that you spend each month, and you go to a First Friday in the city near you and go to a studio and you have that already saved. But it really does feel like, hey, this is a priority in my budget. This is something that I value in my community, and I'm setting aside this to consciously put towards that, put a little skin in the game, so to speak.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I love that idea too, especially early on in your collection, because it was like committing to your collection early on. It's a great idea. I haven't heard that before. I love that.
Yeah, I like that. And last question, unless you thought of the other question, but anyway.
I haven't, it's gone.
That's okay. Hey, it may come back. You never know. Okay. Not last question, almost last question. If you had $100 right now, what would you splurge it on or invest in? It has to bring you joy and be art related in some way, shape, or form.
Oh, $100 right now. The first thing I said is donate it. But then I was like, well, where would I donate it where it felt like it was meaningful? But that was the first thought, like to donate it, but I would need to think of an organization or a project.
I love that.
So I would definitely pay it forward.
I love that. And I think that's one thing that I really admire about how you talk about the local arts community and your collection, is that you are very intentional with everything that you do. And you want to make sure that what you're doing is making a big difference. I mean, of course, $100 to any organization that's for a good cause is helpful. And so if people can support organizations financially, that's amazing. But donating $100 to the Smithsonian or to a international organization might not have as much of a perceived effect as someone who's campaigning to earn like $500 for this super awesome after school program, or this super awesome, they want to have a summer workshop and they need $1,000. Like that really makes a big difference.
And I just actually thought about like a friend of mine who's an artist. He had a crowdfunding campaign a few years ago to travel around the world he's a photographer, and I contributed to that. So something like that. Or there was an artist that worked with Popbox Gallery to create a zine, which will come out soon. They did an amazing job. Yes. And our collaborator on that underwrote the project, but I think I would give it to him, to Jet. The $100, just to say, thank you for like seeing the vision and elevating it even further. I love that question, Adriana. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. We have loved talking to you. But the last question before we go, what upcoming projects or initiatives are you super excited about, and how can our listeners support you in those?
Ooh. Well, Popbox Gallery. Yeah. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Popbox Gallery, we did have this residency at Boxyard RTP for 3 months, and we loved that approach. We like being freelance art administrators, and so we want to continue with that model. We have applied for some grants, but if you are a funder and want to support really innovative, inclusive art programming, then support us. If you are a member of the public who just wants to learn more about art, or connect and support more local artists, then I would suggest following us on Instagram and just staying connected while we develop the next phase. If you're a commercial real estate owner with space that could be used for exhibiting art for 3 months and comes with some financial support to ensure that all the artists are paid and all the gallery attendants are paid, holler at us. We are looking for our next residency space. And I think I covered everyone, but yeah, all things Popbox.
Yeah. What's the Instagram for Popbox?
It's just Popbox Gallery. It's the same for the website as well, popboxgallery.com.
Yeah. And for artists interested in being involved, the best way would be through the Instagram.
Yeah, or even going on our website and signing up for our newsletter, or as a way to stay in contact, or even just emailing us at popboxgallery@gmail.com. Like, just holler at us. And we don't have any projects scheduled yet. We will likely have something to announce in the fall. So yeah, just get connected with us, and then we can grow from there.
Yeah, that's perfect. Okay, so that's regarding Popbox. How about with yourself? Do you put your collection online anywhere there it can be viewed, or maybe that's a future project? Not trying to add more things to the list, right?
Yeah, I haven't actually. I did. I just moved. So another reason why I have the art loan program is that I like living in small spaces. So my condo is 643 square feet. So my art partner, Laura, Richie, just hung most of my art in my new condo, and I haven't posted it on Instagram, but I'm pedaling with Mavis is my Instagram handle. So PETALING, like a flower pedaling with Mavis is my Instagram handle. And I probably will be posting some pictures from the new hang in the near future. We still have a few more pieces to hang. Yeah.
No, that's actually perfect. Thank you for that. Because that way, if any of our listeners or viewers are curious about some of the artwork you described in your collection earlier, well, that's a place to not just see what you have in your collection, but also the artists that you're into. And then that way, it's almost like a word of mouth type situation. And then other people can discover them too that perhaps are following you. So thank you so much for that. This has been an awesome conversation. I'm so glad we obviously had a wide range of like collecting, a little bit of the legal / legacy side of it, a little bit how to like factors to consider before making that investment. So I'm really glad we did this because
me too.
Jackie and I had a convo about starting it, but this is more like also a little bit farther in the journey, if you will, and some higher ticket item consideration, for when we, at least myself, I'll speak for myself. When I get to that level, I'm nowhere near the $9,000 level yet. But I do like the idea of thinking of it from that perspective. And who knows, maybe we'll all have museums with our names in the past, or
claim it.
Or with the labels that I already have on them, where they say like, this was donated by the Gragg Foundation, okay, we've all seen those in museums, so that would be
I love it
too. But thank you so much for joining us today. This
thank you for making this podcast. I'm glad that you all are producing this content.
Absolutely.
Nice to see you again.
And no, this has been amazing, and thank you so much. For our listeners, as always, all of the information that we just talked about, including how to stay in contact with Mavis and the Popbox Gallery, will be listed in today's show notes, as well as a link to our blog and links to all of our other podcast episodes.
Yep. And if you want to stay connected with with us between episodes. You can interact with us on social media. I'm at May Art across all platforms.
And I'm at J Sander Studio on all platforms. And the podcast is at Level Up Artists on Instagram. So thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.